Wow. Welcome to the September 3rd workshop. We have one major item on the agenda tonight, the updated comprehensive plan with David. But since the mayor isn't here, I'm going to step outside the box and ask our public works director if he could give us an update on the activity that's occurring up on 91st with the opening of school tomorrow. I drove through there today and wow. I don't want to be on the end of the phone calls that come through. So if he could update us, I think the council would be appreciative of that. So
Sure.
Take it away, Aaron.
Sure, happy to do it. So today's my first day back from vacation, so I was a
Welcome.
bit surprised as well. Yeah, but yeah, it's the first thing that hit my inbox and the first thing I looked into. Today was a really busy day up there. They were pouring concrete driveways and ramps so that they're cured enough so that they can be walked on tomorrow. So tomorrow, the kids are going to be walking on the gravel pathway as it is now and across these ramps to get to school during the pickup and drop off times. Traffic will be controlled in the same way it is now. They'll have flaggers in certain areas and two-way traffic in other areas. Their goal is to wrap up the project by the 11th next week. And essentially what they have left to do is asphalt and plantings. So most of the pathway is asphalt. That's a cost saving measure. Anyway, the idea is to finish the concrete as soon as possible and then work on the asphalt. They've got the concrete done and they'll be working on asphalt later this week. And during pickup and drop off for school, like I said, the pathway will be open for students to use. So they'll essentially stand down and wait and help people through the work zone. They're behind. I understand that they're about a week behind. We did have some unanticipated rain a few weeks ago, a week and a half ago, which slowed them down several days. But we're going to look at options for some contractual enforcement on being late on delivering this project. It doesn't make the public works director happy. I don't think it makes the council happy when we have active work zones in school areas or near schools when we had said we wouldn't do that. So here we are. We're doing the best we can. I know the contractor is as well, and we're pushing the contractor really hard to accommodate the kids and parents that are going to be using this roadway and sidewalk.
I appreciate it's a tough situation, but first day of school, it's chaotic to begin with, and then we can throw construction in the middle of it, narrowing down a road down to one way essentially with traffic control and so forth. It's just like, I don't want to be around here.
Yeah.
I mean, it's, I don't envy your position at all, but I guess that's, hindsight's a great thing. Should have started the project in July.
Yeah, we had a bidding challenge, right? And so we actually rebid the project. We had some issues with our original bid package, which delayed us a month. So we learned from that. And here we are learning a little bit of lesson at the end of this project as well.
Can I ask a follow-up question? Have the sidewalks, or not the sidewalks, but the crosswalks been addressed within a mile of each school so that our walkers have painted crosswalks? Because I know a lot of them throughout the city are pretty faded. And do we have a focus on our crosswalks within a mile of each school so that our walking children have visible sidewalks, or not sidewalks, but crosswalks?
Councilmember Shipman, I want to meet your expectations. So the short answer is yes. We have a thermoplastic contract out now to do that work, but it won't be completed until mid-October. That's our current schedule. So in some cases, the thermoplastic isn't great, like you mentioned, but it will be better in the next few weeks.
And is there a reason why it's taking till mid-October? Because I'm sure we're going to be asked why.
Sure.
So I would like to have an answer to provide.
It's a staffing resource problem. I'll be completely honest. It's a project we designed in-house. We have engineers who are spread thin, and they weren't simply able to deliver the project before school restarted. It's absolutely an opportunity to improve.
Are we understaffed then in your department?
Engineers are spread thin. Yeah. Well, I mean, essentially we have two engineers and a capital project manager. So in terms of the work they're doing, they're fielding all of these ViewWorks issues. So traffic, traffic calming, parking. They're dealing with some civil plan review, and they're also trying to deliver capital projects. It's a huge lift. And for three people to do it all, they're doing the best they can. I promise you, they're very busy in their offices, doors shut, trying to get the work out the door.
Thank you.
So I'm very bothered by this project. It was 3 full weeks from the day that the contract was awarded. We had a special meeting to approve this contract. We were told explicitly that this will be completed by the time school started. It took 3 full weeks before a single piece of any work was done on that project. I drive by there several times every day. I'm not a project manager, but I'm responsible to make sure that the work is done. No one is going to be walking along there. There's a sod edge off the road that's about a foot deep next to the curb. You don't think kids aren't going to go wander off and trip on that, fall into the road? It's not prepared for students to walk on. It's not safe.
Okay.
And I've worked construction, and I know there's timelines, there's daily and weekly goals. And if they're not met, you work extra hours until it's done. I was told that they were going to be working extended hours to make sure the project was being completed on time. That has not taken place. So I don't know who's responsible, either the contractor or the city, but either way is completely unacceptable. And I'm concerned for the safety of the students and the people that are walking in the middle of the road because they don't want to walk on that sidewalk. So I want to know what the monetary penalty is for the contractor, and I'm not buying the rain. That rain was a 1-day potential delay. There was no concrete that was being laid. There was nothing that would have prevented them from working in the rain.
Sure.
So what I would like a report, monetary compensation that the city's going to be receiving, because there's should be a daily or weekly penalty for the contractor for not meeting the timelines. And I want to know who's going to be liable in the event that a child is injured walking to and from the school because our school zone is not taken care of. I don't want to use this contractor again, and I don't want to approve a project that's going to cause more potential risk. And Greg can maybe speak more on this, but I'm just really, really frustrated at the way this is played out. I was assured repeatedly that this will be done on time. I would not have approved this project if I'd known there was going to be these type of delays and the casualness with which this project seems to be carried out.
Well, I'll try to get my arms around the casualness the best I can. I'll definitely follow up with the team and find out what the working days were and the hours they worked, because we track that. I don't have that for you now. Happy to report on it. Councilmember Ewing, I've been managing capital projects for 15 years. It's not that long, but I've done a few. I've had sidewalk projects constructed near schools during the school year, and we've made it safe. And we will do the same for this project. We are not going to have students walking in the road in that the patchback area, that 1.5 foot wide area. They're going to walk on the concrete and the gravel where the path will be. They're going to be off the road. We're going to do everything we can to make it safe. Again, I've done sidewalk projects near schools during school in this community, and we've made it safe and work.
Aaron, are you kind of insinuating that the kids are going to be walking and construction activity is going to be taking place as well? So the lane closure takes place, or are they going to shut down?
They're going to shut down during pickup and drop off. So they will shut down, stabilize, and move kids across the path as constructed right now. So it's a stabilized gravel path with ramps up to concrete landings across roadways and back down to a gravel path. They will not be walking through an active construction zone. They will not be walking in the street.
Okay.
And will there be people helping with the traffic up there? I've been up there during drop off and pickup. And there's a lot of traffic. It's been diverted through a local neighborhood, so it's not all on 91st for kids that attend Hillcrest. And so that, definitely helps some. But like Steve, I was driving on that road and the lane that has a sidewalk, the way it's striped now, I drive a little Subaru Crosstrek and felt like I barely had enough room to stay out of where the concrete is cut. So it's a really, really busy. I know you've worked on these. I'm like the rookie up here. But I do have some concerns because I do have a lot of experience working around the schools.
Sure.
And it's going to be jam-packed with it being the first day of school. Thankfully, our kinders don't start until the 9th. So it'll be first through fifth graders. So that will lighten the traffic a little bit. But is there going to be someone up there helping with traffic outside of what the school district is able to provide?
Yeah, Councilmember Shipman, of course. So we're going to have,
Thank you.
construction personnel at the crossings. And we're going to have them helping people safely navigate this pedestrian detour. That essentially that's what will happen is the contractor will stand down and all of the employees, that are dealing with traffic control will focus on moving people through the site efficiently rather than managing excavators and concrete.
So
That's
Aaron,
the
just one
expectation.
last thing, I know I've already beaten the dead horse. Dr. Templeton was here, our new superintendent was here at the lectern, and she was promised, and the council's promised as recently as last week that it would be completed by the time school started. And so I don't like starting out on a bad foot with the city and this new superintendent, and basically misrepresenting the status of the project to her, and to the council as recently as a week ago. Because she's concerned for the 9,600 students, as am I, that are in the Lake Stevens School District that are, many of whom are in that area. So, anyway,
I'll add one thing to that. Councilmember Ewing, it's very important to me personally that we have a good relationship with the new superintendent. We had a great relationship with the outgoing superintendent. I don't want to get off on the wrong foot, but I will say that we were given an award. Public Works was given an award by the school district for our collaboration with them. So we have a very strong relationship. We've replaced the school zone signs. We've replaced RRFBs. We've put sidewalks, prioritized sidewalks near schools. 1 week delay on a construction project, while significant and disruptive, certainly shouldn't undermine all of that effort to date. Listen, I'm going to talk with the team and set the expectation that this won't happen again. That certainly doesn't unspill the milk. So
it's not, I don't want that to happen again, where we tell a prominent figure in the community that we're going to do something and that we don't meet those expectations.
yeah, I
Or
completely
anyone,
agree.
really. It doesn't matter that she's prominent, but anyone, tell them and not meet those expectations.
Sure.
Thanks for your attention to this, Aaron.
Yeah.
Sounds like you got your arms around it. Thanks for your diligence.
You understand where we're coming from, I hope.
Yeah,
Okay.
I understand, Councilmember
Okay.
Peter Shagan.
I
Yeah,
guess, from positive side, learning experience, hopefully we don't repeat our
Yeah.
past mistakes, I guess. If you
Yeah.
want to put this in the mistake category, I would, but anyway, let's move forward. David, comprehensive plan update.
All right, thank you. David Levitan, Senior Planner. So I'm just going to give a quick PowerPoint and then open it up for council discussion and comments and questions. I would note the staff report had referenced an update to attachment 2. That wasn't quite done last Thursday when the packet went out. That's the map of potential zoning map amendments. So I did hand out hard copies of that this evening. The major change from what was shared in the packet is that the staff kind of reassessed and reevaluated some of the proposed changes to some of the predominantly single-family residential zoning districts, areas that had been proposed to go from R4 to R6 or R6 to RA12, as we were looking back through our land capacity analysis and really the areas that we needed to focus on. A lot of those areas, we had initially proposed some changes because a lot of those neighborhoods were more reflective of the proposed zoning as opposed to the existing zoning. But those areas have largely all developed over the last decade to 15 years. There wasn't a whole lot of value of doing kind of larger scale rezones. And so that's something that we can look at the future, but that wasn't anything that was being driven by our projected housing targets or our housing needs over the next 20 years. So we wanted really this periodic update to focus on the areas that we need to accommodate more multifamily residential housing to meet our growth targets at lower income levels. So we've scaled back significantly on the other zoning changes. So with that, just wanted to give a quick PowerPoint. Going to just give a really high level overview of the process and requirements for the comp plan. Attachment 1 in your packet tonight is the draft policy document that was issued for public review on July 26, shared with the public, different agencies, tribes, other community partners. Wanted to get council feedback this evening and then discuss next steps. So we had a similar meeting with the Planning Commission back on August 19th. We're now holding this kind of last work session with the City Council. We're going to be doing another kind of final work session with the Planning Commission on September 18th, and then are proposing to move on to the public hearings with the Planning Commission on October 2nd. So just a little bit about the comp plan. Kind of most of the people in this room have heard this before, but for those that haven't, required now to update the plan every 10 years. That's under the updated Growth Management Act. Our current deadline is December 31st, 2024. Needs to be consistent with the Growth Management Act, Vision 2050, as well as Snohomish County countywide planning policies. Needs to be reviewed by the Department of Commerce and PSRC. It's also distributed to other agencies. We've gotten initial comments from both PSRC and the Department of Commerce, which will provide kind of a high-level summary of on. We're meeting with the Department of Commerce. City staff is meeting with the Department of Commerce tomorrow afternoon to go over their preliminary comments. And so, yeah, that's kind of the high level of where we're at. So just a little bit on the process. So started really summer of 2023 with some of the engagement, community engagement moving on into the fall of 2023. Spent really the last 6 to 8 months working on policy and plan development, the background research sections, policy and goal development. And so have done that primarily through the Planning Commission over the last 6 to 8 months. We're now kind of at the tail end of summer and are issued the public review draft back on July 26th. Asked for public comments by August 25th, ideally, but we're continuing to solicit and allow for additional comments since we've pushed back the hearing dates by a couple of weeks. We want to continue to encourage the public to submit their comments on the draft plan. We're going to be issuing the SEPA threshold determination and also doing public noticing. So a lot of this, especially on the map amendments, is making sure that we get adequate notice out into the community. Obviously, there are kind of procedural requirements within the municipal code, but also just wanting to make sure that the community is aware and has a little bit of context on the proposed changes as opposed to just getting a land use notice in the mail. Jill Needham in our office is developing a very cool story map through ESRI, a GIS map that basically, when notice is mailed out, the public will be able to go to this, and all of the different land use map amendments are kind of categorized and compartmentalized basically so that there's a little bit more information on each of those, depending on which area you are located. So that notice is going to go out both to affected property owners and then also to property owners within 300 feet of any proposed map amendment. So we anticipate that going out in the next week. And that will also serve as the notice of public hearing for the Planning Commission meeting on October 2nd. So a little bit just on the growth targets. We've talked about this at previous meetings, but basically that is really what's driving the periodic update. The city needs to plan for the period between 2020 and 2044 to add about 9,600 new residents. about 3,200 new jobs, and just under 5,000 new housing units. Those housing units are kind of split evenly between what are assumed to be primarily detached single-family residences, affordable at or above 100% of area median income. And then about half of our housing needs are at below 80% of area median income. So kind of using the guidance from the Department of Commerce, we need to plan for different housing types that are affordable at those different income bands. So really a lot of what we've been focused on potential map amendments is identifying additional areas for multifamily residential where would create additional capacity for kind of the extremely low, very low, and low income band. So basically 0 to 30% of AMI, 30 to 50% of AMI, and 50 to 80% of AMI. And for context, area median income in 2024 for a family of four is $150,000. That number has gone up a lot over the last few years. But if you talk to anybody that is making that area median income and if they're looking for housing in Lake Stevens, it's still incredibly difficult to find housing that's affordable even at those levels. So to find housing at 0 to 30, 30 to 50, or 50 to 80% is even more difficult. So how must the city plan? Really kind of first and foremost, other than compliance with the Growth Management Act, is consistency with the regional growth strategy as spelled out in Vision 2050. We need to address recent changes to state law, primarily through the Growth Management Act. That includes a number of different topics such as climate change adaptation, mitigation, and resilience, kind of very prescriptively meeting our housing needs or demonstrating our ability to provide the policy framework to meet our housing needs at all income levels, especially at lower income levels, needing to address racially disparate impacts in housing, as well as potential displacement of existing residents and businesses, and then just the general concept of equity in housing and business opportunities, as well as quality of life. So just very quick discussion of our housing needs. We had discussed this back in June with the city council, but I kind of previously mentioned it. Our needs are basically split about half and half as far as above 100% of area median income, which are anticipated to be mostly kind of duplexes, triplexes, single family residences, and then at or below 80% of area median income, which there is some opportunity for accessory dwelling units, but the assumption is that most of that would be through multifamily residential housing. Just a little bit on the draft plan that was shared in attachment 1. My apologies for the incredibly long packet, but that's just how long the plan is. So it was issued on July 26th. It includes an introduction as well as 8 elements, both mandatory elements as defined by the Growth Management Act, as well as optional elements that the city can update. I would note, as it relates to the Parks, Recreation, and Open Space element, we did do an update as part of this periodic update, but we are going to be required as part of our 6-year cycle for updating basically what's the PROS plan, the Parks, Recreation, and Open Space plan. That's due at the end of 2025. So Planning Department will work collaboratively with Parks and Recreation to update that. So there will be more kind of large scale updates to that Parks and Recreation element occurring in 2025. So we held off on some of those updates as part of this effort. We've had limited public comments to date, kind of looking for additional opportunities to help spread the word, used social media, news flashes, kind of distributed to our email list. We have started to receive more agency comments. So far, we've received them from the Department of Natural Resources, Department of Fish and Wildlife, Department of Transportation, the Puget Sound Partnerships Ecological Coordination Board, Puget Sound Regional Council, and the Department of Commerce, who we'll be meeting with tomorrow. And really just kind of a high-level summary of some of those agency comments. As you'd expect, the UCB, or Environmental Coordination Board, focused a lot on salmon and Puget Sound recovery. WashDOT on complete streets, DNR kind of on hazardous areas, climate change, natural hazard mitigation planning. DFW had pretty extensive comments. A lot of them focused on kind of some core topics of regional watershed coordination, kind of better evaluating climate change impacts, kind of greater discussion of wildlife corridors, as well as comments on shoreline management and critical areas protection. And then PSRC and Commerce had a lot of overlap in their comments. They were generally very complimentary of the draft document, but just noted some areas where we needed to beef up the land capacity analysis, do some additional natural hazards mapping, and kind of disparate impacts, racial displacement risks, and then addressing kind of equity and environmental justice. And so it's not spelled correctly, but can get into a little bit more on that. So as I mentioned, attachment 2 in the packet has been updated, and a hard copy of that has been distributed to the council as well as to members of the audience. So that had previously been reviewed. It was significantly scaled back just to focus primarily on our needs at lower income levels. It also aims to address our current capacities in employment, which is about 1,100 jobs. Kind of after this PowerPoint, I'm happy to pull up a map on the screen so that we can kind of scroll around. It's hard to see, obviously, at this scale, but happy to zoom in on any particular areas. Really, a lot of our employment capacity is going to be met within the Lake Stevens Industrial Center. So we did go through kind of not a sub-area planning process, but a sub-area-like planning process back in 2023, identified some strategies for increasing employment capacity. One of those is standardizing the zoning within the industrial zone and expanding kind of the number of permitted uses. And so happy to talk a little bit about that. Also looking at increasing some of the commercially designated areas, expanding the downtown Lake Stevens sub-area boundaries a little bit to the west, just north of here. And then including some additional commercial areas down off of 20th Street Southeast. So as I mentioned, the noticing for that will be going out over the next week. I want to make it as easy for people to get that information and understand what the proposed zoning, what the proposed land use and zoning map amendments mean. And so that's really going to be a focus, and where we think we're probably going to get the greatest number of comments is probably on the map changes. So as I mentioned, looking for any council feedback tonight, discussion on any proposed changes, and then looking forward, we're currently working on incorporating comments that we've received from the public and from agencies. We're going to be meeting with some of those agencies over the next week. We'll be kind of issuing our SEPA threshold determination. So a lot of that is focusing on the employment and housing capacity and the potential environmental impacts of that. So we need to finalize that. We've made some of those proposed zoning map amendment changes, scaled some of those back. So that's going to have an impact on our environmental analysis. So we're finalizing that now. We'll be issuing a public notice, having the last planning commission briefing on September 18th. And then are tentatively planning to have the public hearing before the Planning Commission for them to make their recommendation on October 2nd. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions or
Hopefully you all heard that, but any questions for, didn't have my mic on, sorry. Any questions for David?
David, I keep hearing talking about affordable housing and so forth. What in this plan helps address affordable housing, out of curiosity? Other than making it multifamily, doing accessory dwelling units, but there's what other plan is there to address affordable?
Yeah, so we're not housing developers, and so we can't guarantee that any of this housing is to be able to be built. Really, it's establishing the zoning and policy framework. So providing the comprehensive plan goals and policies that prioritize the provision of affordable housing, basically providing that zoning framework that allows for the types of housing types, the types of housing units that are more likely to be affordable. It's still going to take an incredible amount of partnerships. It's going to take, I mean, just given the cost of land right now, it's pretty difficult to get, anything below market rate housing built. And so we are somewhat limited, and it's really just trying to follow the state framework and trying to be consistent with the countywide planning policies, with the Growth Management Act, with the MPPs from the multi-county planning policies from Vision 2050, basically just providing that policy framework. Because again, we can't guarantee that any of this housing is going to be built. We just need to show that we're providing adequate capacity and that we're providing the policy support to get this built and try to develop partnerships to help to get it done.
Add some additional.
Yeah.
Councilmember Taggian, to answer your question in a slightly different way. As David said, the comprehensive plan update, that just sets our policy priorities, the framework. Next year, we're going to get to the implementation, and that's where we'll be asking the Planning Commission and City Council to consider some legislative changes, again, that would support the creation of affordable housing. We will be talking about potential fee reductions, maybe streamlining the permit process, or at least giving expedited permit review for affordable housing projects. At some point, we're going to have a conversation with the council on inclusionary zoning if, there's an interest to use that as a tool to make it mandatory with commercial private development. So that's really the next phase where we'll really be talking about from the city, can we advance affordable housing through a variety of tools? So that conversation is coming with the council. This document just sets, again, the framework in place of the things we can legally do or how we may act in the future.
Gotcha. Just curious how it was.
Yeah, I get it.
If I could piggyback on Marcus's, Councilmember Taggian's question and answers, I really appreciated chapter 3. I thought that the definitions and the information provided was really beneficial. There are 3 areas I really want to call out and look forward to the opportunity to weigh in and make some changes here in the city. I think as the 4th largest city in Snohomish County, we can look to the 3 larger cities at some of the strategies that they've already enacted. On page 96 of 331, towards the bottom, it talks about density bonuses. And you had just, I think, referenced that might be an area where we can look at making some changes here in the city. I think that if we have land available and we have developers who are willing to build and set aside units to be low income units, that we can provide some sort of financial incentive for them to do that. I look forward to those further conversations. Also on page 98 of 331, I think you also just referenced this, the priority permit processing. I know there are other cities in our county who are currently allowing for a streamlined process or a faster process for low-income housing developers to be able to move their projects through a little quicker. I do really appreciate that the final sentence in that section, though, ensuring that if we are going to provide priority permitting, that we really are looking at what the project looks like, that we're ensuring that there are set-asides for our lower income folks, and that those set-asides are in place for a significant period of time, not just for the first year of occupancy. I also really appreciate the importance on page 99, where it talks about partnering with public and nonprofit housing developers. We have experts in our county who are developing nonprofit housing as we speak, typically in Everett and Linwood, larger, more urban areas of our county. But there is a growing population. Like Stevens, you've done an excellent job of showing that there's a growing low-income population, a growing population of folks who are cost-burdened living in our city, and the opportunity to partner with the experts that are working in Snohomish County, I think, is an exciting one and something that shouldn't be overlooked. I think the other piece that I just want to point out that it doesn't belong in this plan, but that is a reality, is that federally there have been some great strides having federal funds available for low-income housing, specifically the HUD 811 program. And I believe that that HASCO, our Snohomish County Housing Authority, will be the recipient of some of those funds. So maintaining that relationship with the Housing Authority, maintaining just the knowledge of those funds being available, so that when we have the opportunity, we can look at developing that type of housing in our community, I think is going to help us meet these goals. So I appreciate the work. I appreciate all the information in the entire plan, but I was most excited about chapter 3. So thanks for the information.
May I piggyback on chapter 3? Page 95 talks about city permits up to 2 accessory dwelling units per residential lot, 1 attached and 1 detached. So the issue that I've had, and I've discussed this with our surface water person, that, you know, even if we make adjustments to impervious surface, we have issues with dealing with the stormwater. And so until we can address that, I think in like smaller neighborhoods, like a lot that are in the community, if someone were desirous to have one of those options, dealing with that water is going to be a significant issue. So I don't know, it's outside my area of expertise, but how we can help provide options for people to make that an option, so that if that's a route they want to go, you know, I think it can be up to 1,000 square feet per unit, and that could help to mitigate some of the housing issues. And I don't see that necessarily called out specifically there as far as ADUs, but if there's something we can do to put things in place to make that more doable. Realistic, yes.
Yeah.
Thanks, Marcus. That'd be great.
I mean, it's going to be a real rare property that'll fit that description in our community. That's why there's like, you think he said there's only, just not quoting you, but there was only like 3 or 4 properties that people had done in the last year that were really out there. So to have these parameters there, it's a great idea, but at the end of the day, it's not realistic. So unless we do something different, that infill that we keep talking about just isn't going to come through.
And it definitely, as the lot sizes have gotten smaller and we've updated our zoning code to try to increase density and try to meet our growth targets in previous periodic updates, it gets harder and harder then to fit multiple ADUs. And so even if the state legislation allows it, it does allow for local regulations. We can't exclude them. But yeah, we have people come in that are right at their maximum impervious and they're wanting to put in like a backyard deck and they can't do it. So trying to squeeze in an ADU can definitely be difficult. And so, yeah, Councilmember, you and I we definitely on the implementation side need to think of ways to better accommodate this if people are wanting to build them. If the demand starts to be there and it's been demonstrated that there is, you know, that they can be utilized for maybe not extremely low income residents, but definitely it's more affordable than, you know, trying to build and live in a detached single family home. And so we definitely want to look at ways that we can make development of ADUs more realistic and more plentiful in the city.
Thank you.
And I just had a question on the overall objectives of the 2024 comprehensive plan. It's towards the beginning on page 28. Number 6 says involving citizens and stakeholders, and the GMA requires local jurisdiction, and it goes on. So I know that we just recently put a survey out on social media that had a very, very small percentage actually partake. I know it's probably been 5 years ago. We had a workshop for our city council that was advertised pretty well. It was over by where the police department is now. And the general public could attend it. And it basically was an education on the Growth Management Act. And I was sitting front row as a citizen and learned so much at that meeting. And so we've got, you know, the Growth Management Act, we've got SEPA, we have some new House bills that we're dealing with. And I think all these things are causing confusion with our citizens, and they're being very critical of many of the things going on in our city, I think simply because they're unaware of our requirements. So I'm wondering, when it comes to involving citizens and stakeholders, do we have anything in place where we might have a workshop that we do advertise that people can, the general public couldn't speak at it, but we could attend it and become educated on what exactly it is, how it's impacting our community, and, you know, what our city is required to do. I think our citizens are really confused as to how and why we're growing the way that we are.
Well, specific to the comprehensive plan, we have had significant, outreach, starting with community surveys, back in 2023, doing events at the farmers market, at Aquafest. We've held 2 public open houses, and we have a whole public participation plan, a website, doing story maps. So, I mean, we have done that for the parameters of this project, but we absolutely can schedule a public training seminar if we want to use the Planning Commission or another forum to do sort of a different type of education, as you're saying, like we did a few years ago. So I think I was one of the presenters. So yeah, we certainly can try to do that. And we do try to do that more in the Planning Commission forum, where we do have pretty large conversations on the why we're doing things to sort of help guide that along. Unfortunately, we don't get a lot of participation all the time, but we can certainly try to look to schedule something before now in the hearing that just talks about the process again.
I know the meeting, yeah, like I said, I think it was 5 years ago, because it was right after several of our current council members were just recently elected. And there was a large, I mean, almost every seat was full in the audience. And I think part of that was it was advertised and we were made aware of it. But on social media, like the surveys, and they're so limited, right? They're limited to just a handful of questions with a handful of options that really don't explain the whys, but more the, what do you think of this? And I think that our citizens would be well served if they understood the whys. Why are we required to do this? And why are we making these decisions the way that we are? I think it would be really beneficial to our citizens.
That's a great comment. And what I'm thinking, maybe not a public meeting, but I think if it's what you're suggesting, and I'm not promising anything, but maybe we can do a video and put that on our website and just do a quick video of the why are we doing this leading up to the kind of the final stages of this
I think
plan.
that would be helpful.
Okay.
Thank you.
The hardest part for me on that is people only get involved when it's in their backyard. So as much as the information's out there, they only care when it affects their daily life, or generally they don't want the deer to disappear out of some area that they thought was going to stay pristine for the rest of their lives.
But like I said, when we did that 5 years ago, almost every seat was full. And it wasn't necessarily in my backyard and I was there. So I think we need to give people the benefit of the doubt.
Sure.
And do the best we can to educate them on why we're making the decisions that we are.
But if I can add to that, we did a police academy, citizens academy that was very well received. And I think we have really outstanding leadership in our city. I mean, Chief Bezos and his team, and we have our Director Wright and his team. I think, I've been following them long before I was on Planning Commission or Council, and they just, been doing a really good job for many years of explaining things for people like me that aren't planners. To help them understand in layman's terms, why things are the way they are. So I think there's value in that. So maybe start with an online, little video thing. And then maybe if that's well received, we get a lot of hits from it. Maybe we progress to another in-person academy.
It's a good idea.
So I guess, I appreciate your comments, Councilmember Shipman. But I guess, it kind of gets down to what's the reality that this is actually going to happen? Because when you start figuring we've got about 250 acres, give or take, of developable land. And in order to accommodate 9,600 people, how many acres would need to be redeveloped? Meaning houses torn down and 3 or 4 houses built in their place. Do we have any idea? You're probably talking close to 1,000 acres, right?
Yeah, we're largely reliant on infill and redevelopment as opposed to just given our lack of land.
Yeah. So that gets back to the reality check. How many people are going to sell their homes in their present state to a developer that's going to allow for that 3 to 4 dwelling units, maybe 5 or 6 or 8 or an apartment building? Probably not very many, being a residential suburban neighborhood. Then you add the issue of capacity for utility, storm drainage, sewer, water, the upsizing of all that takes for that. So the likelihood that we're going to accommodate 9,600 people in the next 20 years is probably pretty remote because we're pretty well built out. And so that gets back to the issue of supply. How do we accommodate supply? And it's, as David said, the primary driver of this is land costs to get the affordability. So, I mean, the end of the day is the only way we're going to get or make a dent to this is if we expand our urban growth boundary area, plain and simple. And if we don't do that, I mean, this plan's a great plan, but it's kind of like, what's the likelihood of it getting there? Probably not very high.
Unless we're going high density.
What's that?
We're gonna have to go a lot more high density with the lots that are available.
Exactly.
And
so
that's
it's
not gonna
that,
make people comfortable.
right.
The high density apartment complex is high density because to take someone's lot and try to build a 4-unit is almost not worth it. If you could put 4 on there, it's almost, the costs are so high, it's almost not worth it to take a house, rip it down, and then put 4 new ones in. The cost, it almost gets you probably above breaking, but not a whole lot. There's not a lot and a lot of high risk on. That's hard.
And those aren't affordable housing.
That's never gonna be.
That's market rate housing.
And that's on a nice lot that's like level and doesn't have like.
Yeah, that's a
Yeah.
perfect situation.
Yeah.
And then you're talking about upsizing utilities. What's the likelihood you got the adequate sewer capability there? Because it's been predominantly a single family residence on a 9,600 lot. Probably not great, you know, so.
And then you're doing curbs, gutters, sidewalks on top of all
Yeah.
that. That is not getting any cheaper to be done. So.
And the storm drainage question. So I guess I mean, I appreciate doing all this work and so forth, but it's kind of like, you know, the reality check is how do we get the supply to be increased in order to keep the cost stabilized? You're probably not going to go backwards unless we have a recession on the cost of housing because the regulatory effects of putting a project together are so impactful that you know, you're lucky if you can stabilize things. So how do you create more supply? And I would argue you're not going to do it by doing all these little tweaks and so forth in here. And you know, as much as you hate to say it, I mean, plain and simple, we've got to increase our urban growth boundary area. And I know the county is not favorable to that, but we have to keep making that push. So David, when do you expect this to come to council? The planning commissions is October 2nd.
Yeah, so we were looking at potential dates, trying to coordinate it with your budget public hearings, just not to overload any meetings. I think the budget, I believe, is November 12th. So we would want to be before. We know that November 5th is election day. That's probably not ideal. And November 12th, I believe, is the budget. So if we were able to do potentially the last meeting in October, or else would need to find an alternative date. Yeah.
October 22nd.
22nd.
Also a budget public hearing that night. I don't know why I'm thinking. What is that?
Audio must be on. There could.
Exactly. Fill the blanks, check the box. Which makes
I'm muted.
Who is it? Someone in the meeting?
Okay, let's start.
Let's see your thing real quick.
Anyway, to answer your question, mid-October, early November is you.
Can I make a mention for the record now that my mic is working? I do have a couple hands up on attendees in the Zoom meeting right now, and I just want to make a note for the record. This is a workshop, not taking citizen comments tonight. So I'm not ignoring you. We just don't have that opportunity tonight, but it sounds like you'll be coming back end of October. And we'll have additional opportunities then, or at the planning commission public hearing.
But those folks can submit written comments.
Absolutely.
Council.
Anytime they
At
can
any
email me or the council, and we'll make sure it's part of the record.
You know, Angie, something you said about the affordable housing in Linwood, Everett, and that kind of stuff. A lot of that is around transit-oriented design. And they were able to, because of the amount that they're going to go up and how many, you know, apartment complexes they're doing, they're basically letting those people build those things and only put less than 20% back into affordable housing. And they didn't actually set them to where they had to be that way in perpetuity. So it was like 10 years and then they could go to market rate. So we don't have anything in transit-oriented design yet, mostly because of the trestle. We'd love to have some on 20th Street because it's straight shot to, you know, Everett when they finally get, not in my lifetime, when they finally get light rail to Everett. But that's where a lot of a little bit of affordable housing actually came from, was the transit-oriented design as soon as they set the light rail line.
Right. I would agree. I don't think we're at a place where we can capitalize on the transit-oriented resources that are available. But I think we have to look at there are other affordable housing projects not related to transit that exist in those cities.
And I was just pointing out, that's why they're so successful at it and you got any at all.
Right. Right.
Is that.
Agreed.
And I know Linwood, talking to the mayor, they had to bend over backwards to make that happen.
Yeah, it's not not easy. There are a lot of barriers and out of our control, right? There's systemic barriers to building affordable housing in Snohomish County and Washington State nationally. Otherwise, it wouldn't be an issue. It wouldn't be something we'd have to talk about. But I think that, you know, I think this plan calls out some good strategies to help mitigate some of those barriers. And just, you know, as Council Member Peter Sagan mentioned, you have to have, you have to have the land to be able to even consider any of these options. And so it's a work in progress for sure.
I do appreciate your concern, Angie, for that, and just, you know, being mindful of that as we move forward, you know, because that's an important thing for us to address.
Any other comments, questions? David, Russ?
David, I can't believe you spent 2 weeks on this and I can't even get through it. So.
And I actually wrote it just over the weekend.
Oh,
so
okay, good.
I like to procrastinate.
You labored on Labor Day?
But thank you for the comments.
Appreciate the feedback, Council. We will be making, obviously, as David said, some changes based on the agencies that will incorporate some of those comments, and we will have sort of a narrative that explains the changes we do make. So, and then if there's anything from the public or planning commission.
Could you maybe, David, on this map, maybe give us some idea where these up zones are at? I don't think there's anybody here that has this zoning map memorized. And I'm just wondering where on this are we looking at making some fairly significant changes, I would guess.
Yeah, so let me see if I can pull it up on.
While he's pulling that up, the intersections around 99th and 20th Southeast, the northeast quadrant, that's sort of the largest remaining redevelopable property, and we've targeted that for multifamily. It's on both an arterial and a collector with transit on both of those and access to shopping. So that's one of the areas we are proposing to look at for multifamily. That would be the most significant one.
So how many units would you suspect could be generated out of that area? Because that's only probably about 40 or 50 acres?
You could go 20 stories.
I don't know off the top of my head to answer that question. I haven't done that calculation, but that would be the biggest opportunity, again, because of the site conditions. And a large block of property that, as Councilmember Tagent was saying, where you could put 20 plus units to an acre, not, 10, that's going to make that delta a little bit more reasonable.
Right, but you've got this called out as 8 to 12, right? So you're not going to get 20.
Which one are you talking about? Like,
The northeast quarter of
It currently
99th
is
and
that.
20th.
The
It's-
cross-hatching
yeah, the
changes.
cross-hatching is rezoning that to multifamily residential. So it's showing it as 812 and then but it's an area that's proposed to go to MFR.
Which would get you how many dwelling units per acre?
I would need to look back at the land capacity analysis, but what the assumption was, I think it generated a couple hundred additional units in that area based on the number of acres. I think it was about 10 to 12 additional units per acre. I need to look back at the land capacity analysis on that one.
It's like over 400, 500 population.
So
That
does,
makes the neighbors happy.
does WADA or I'm not sure what agency, but what about the traffic that this high density is going to create? Does the state address, I mean, the state's making this requirement of growth is my understanding. We have these targets we're expected to meet. What is the state doing to address the additional traffic? We're an island out here, and getting off of Lake Stevens, is, as everyone knows, not an easy feat.
It is.
Is the state partnering with us as far as traffic?
They do. And so WashDOT obviously has reviewed the plan. They've reviewed the draft map amendments that were even more extensive than this in the 20th Street Southeast Corridor sub-area. And so, yeah, obviously the concept of concurrency within the state of Washington is kind of paramount, is obviously needing to be able to plan for infrastructure improvements at the same time that you're planning for growth. You need to demonstrate the ability to accommodate that growth. You can't just, growth needs to pay for growth, and you need to demonstrate how you can accommodate that growth. It's going to be difficult. We're going to need to have a lot more implementation work, a lot more analysis. Kind of within this area with the sub-area planning that has occurred, we actually have planned for and done environmental analysis we're approaching our capacity within that environmental analysis, the planned action EIS that was done for this area specifically. There were also planned actions done in our other two sub areas. This area anticipated hundreds and hundreds of thousands of commercial and retail square footage that hasn't materialized quite yet. And so we've actually planned for a lot of projected traffic increases that haven't occurred from that commercial component. So that's part of the environmental analysis, is maybe potentially some of the shift from commercial to residential as the commercial market and just commercial and retail trends have changed even in the last 5 years. They continue to change. And employment trends have continued to change. So it could be that more of our projected growth and more of our projected traffic comes from residential development as opposed to commercial development. So we have planned for some of the capital improvements necessary to accommodate these hundreds of thousands of square feet of employment that we have envisioned within this area as well. But kind of long story short, we're going to need to continue to utilize, for larger projects, utilize SEPA, use our traffic impact fees to identify potential improvements within these specific traffic impact zones, how we're going to accommodate all of the projects that we need to be building over the next 20 years to accommodate this growth.
So jumping back to my original question, I think it's the site just east of Target, which is what's that project called? You're looking to upzone that?
Yeah, so that's one of the few that we kept in as kind of more a housekeeping, just because that one already is basically more consistent with multifamily residential than the existing zoning, I think, is R6. It looks like, yeah, it's that shade of yellow. That was, originally we had planned on doing larger scale zoning map amendments like that throughout the city to better reflect the actual development pattern that's on the ground. But there wasn't a whole lot of utility. But for this, that doesn't add a whole lot of capacity, just because the redevelopment potential in that area, at least in the short term, is probably pretty limited. but it at least does provide that consistency within existing use and looking out kind of on the larger planning horizon. Going to need to continue to identify sites like that, proximity to our sub areas, proximity to commercial, to transit centers, are really looking for areas like that, for kind of targeted map amendments to accommodate more multifamily residential housing.
Any other questions for planning staff? Yep.
Have we had more applicants for the city planner position that's open?
Oh, the planning commission?
Yeah, the planning commission.
Russ may be able
I
to.
have three total. No.
We got 3 total.
You may not even know about the third one. So 3. Sorry.
200% increase.
Every time I tried the planning commission, there were over 20 people. I think one time there was 40.
Council President, can I make one more comment?
Certainly.
Just a reminder to the council, no council meeting next week on the 10th. We're going to cancel that meeting. Got the retreat on the 13th. Agenda and packet will be out soon for that. And that's it.
Okay, so without anything else for the good of the order, I think we accomplished our agenda tonight. So with that, we'll close the meeting. Thank you.